Inside these Nashville walls, country legend George Jones lived a life as turbulent as his hit songs. His mansion wasn't just a home, it was a stage for love, heartbreak, and scandal that the public rarely saw. From wild marital struggles to unforgettable music milestones, every corner tells a story. In 2025, we take a full tour, uncovering the drama, legacy, and secrets that made George Jones an icon. By the mid-1960s, George Jones was already one of country music's most gifted vocalists, but his offstage life was spiraling. Years of binge drinking and amphetamine use on the road finally caught up to him in 1967, forcing him to be admitted to a neurological hospital for treatment. Friends, family, and even Jones himself would later admit that his drinking wasn't just heavy, it was desperate, and he would go to extraordinary lengths to satisfy it when the craving struck. One of the most famous and funniest examples came during his marriage to Shirley Corley, his second wife. Shirley tried to keep him from making the 8-mile, 13-kilometers trip to Beaumont, Texas, to buy liquor. She hid the keys to every car on their property, but she forgot about one unlikely vehicle. In his memoir, I Lived to Tell It All, Jones painted the picture with humor. There, gleaming in the glow, was that 10-horsepower rotary engine under a seat, a key glistening in the ignition. I imagine the top speed for that old mower was 5 miles per hour. It might have taken an hour and a half or more for me to get to the liquor store, but get there I did. Jones piloted the riding lawnmower down back roads, likely drawing stares from late-night drivers, and eventually arrived at the liquor store triumphant. Years later, the story became a part of his legend. He even mocked himself by appearing in Hank Williams Jr.'s All My Rowdy Friends Are Coming Over Tonight music video, where the mower joke resurfaced. In 1993, he revisited the incident in Vince Gill's video for One More Last Chance, and again in his own 1996 clip for Honky Tonk Song, where Jones once more climbed onto a mower as a wink to his fans. The anecdote's ownership has been debated between two of Jones's wives. In her 1979 autobiography, Stand By Your Man, Tammy Wynette claimed it happened while she was married to him. She described waking up at 1 a.m. to find her husband gone. I got into the car and drove to the nearest bar 10 miles, 16 kilometers away, she wrote. When I pulled into the parking lot, there sat our rider mower right by the entrance. He'd driven that mower right down a main highway. He looked up and saw me and said, "Well, fellas, here she is now. My little wife, I told you she'd come after me." Whether it occurred during his time with Corley or Wynette, the story was classic George, humorous, reckless, and a little bit sad. Meeting Tammy Wynette and becoming Mr. and Mrs. Country Music. Jones had known of Wynette before their romance began because their tours were booked through the same agency. At the time, Wynette was married to songwriter Don Chappell, who often opened her shows. Jones, Wynette, and Chappell socialized as friends, but over time, Jones and Wynette's chemistry grew undeniable. In 1969, Jones married Wynette, forming country music's most iconic couple. They began touring together, and Jones was so committed to building their joint career that he bought out his contract with Musicor Records. This allowed him to sign with Epic Records, home to Wynette and her producer, Billy Sherrill, after Wynette had parted ways with her longtime producer, Pappy Daly. The pairing was electric. By the early 1970s, Jones and Wynette were widely known as Mr. and Mrs. Country Music, a title they earned through both their personal union and a string of powerful duet hits. Songs like We're Gonna Hold On, Let's Build a World Together, Golden Ring, and Near You captured their undeniable chemistry and became staples of country radio. But working together wasn't always smooth. Sherrill recalled in a 2002 interview with Dan Daly that Jones's freeform style tested Wynette's patience. "We started out trying to record the vocals together," he said, "but George drove Tammy crazy with his phrasing. He never ever did it the same way twice. He could make a 5-syllable word out of church. Finally, Tammy said, 'Record George and let me listen to it, and then do my vocal after we get his on tape. In October 1970, only weeks after the birth of their daughter, Tamala Georgette Jones, George Jones's long-running battle with alcohol took one of its darkest turns. Following a particularly reckless bender, his friends and family feared for both his safety and theirs. Jones was forcibly straitjacketed and committed to a padded cell at the Watson Clinic in Lakeland, Florida. He spent 10 harrowing days detoxifying under medical supervision, a stay meant to break the dangerous cycle that had plagued him for years. When doctors released him, they prescribed Librium, a common anti-anxiety medication at the time, in the hope that it might steady him. In the months that followed, Jones seemed determined to reform. He managed stretches of sobriety with Tammy Wynette, leaning on her and their new family for strength. The early part of their marriage saw periods of genuine happiness and remarkable musical synergy. But as the decade wore on, Jones's drinking worsened. The pressures of fame, relentless touring schedules, and his own inner demons often undid his best intentions. By 1976, the marriage had fractured beyond repair, and Wynette filed for divorce. Jones accepted responsibility for the collapse of their union, acknowledging that his self-destructive habits had eroded their trust. However, he vehemently denied some of the most damaging allegations Wynette leveled in her autobiography, Stand By Your Man, specifically that he had physically abused her and once fired a shotgun at her during an argument. In interviews, Jones insisted such accusations were untrue, though he admitted that his drinking could make him unpredictable and argumentative. Despite the painful split, Jones and Wynette's professional bond remained unbroken. Their fans, who had invested emotionally in the image of Mr. and Mrs. Country Music, continued to pack venues to see them perform together. Their songs, already emotionally charged, now seemed to echo their real-life heartbreak. Hits like Golden Ring and We're Gonna Hold On took on new meaning when performed by two people whose love had publicly unraveled. In 1980, 4 years after their divorce, they reunited in the studio to record Together Again, an album that yielded another major hit, Two-Story House. Country audiences were enthralled by the irony of the ex-spouses singing about shared dreams and broken promises. Their working relationship wasn't without tension, but it produced some of the most poignant duets in the genre's history. Their complicated connection was memorably captured in Ken Burns's 2019 documentary Country Music, which likened them to two wounded animals, circling each other, drawn together by love and music, but scarred by past injuries. Even after their divorce, Jones openly admitted to hoping for reconciliation. During live performances of his 1981 hit, If Drinkin' Don't Kill Me, Her Memory Will, he would often replace the lyric with Tammy's Memory Will, using humor to mask lingering affection and regret. By the 1990s, the acrimony between them had largely faded. Both stars had moved on personally and professionally, and time had softened old wounds. In 1995, Jones told Country Weekly, "Like the old saying goes, it takes time to heal things, and they've been healed quite a while." Their actions backed up his words. They recorded a final album, One, in 1995, and embarked on a successful reunion tour. Audiences embraced the sight of the legendary pair sharing the stage again, even if their romance belonged to the past. When George Jones signed with Epic Records in the early 1970s, few could have predicted that pairing him with producer Billy Sherrill would become one of the most important chapters of his career. Sherrill, alongside his business partner Glenn Sutton, was synonymous with the countrypolitan sound, a polished blend of country and pop that dominated late 1960s and 1970s, Nashville. To many, countrypolitan represented the antithesis of Jones's gritty, honky-tonk roots. Fans who associated Jones with sawdust floors and dive bars wondered how his raw, emotional voice could possibly mesh with lush string sections and smooth background vocals. At first, the match seemed awkward. Sherrill was accustomed to sculpting sleek, radio-friendly hits for artists like Tammy Wynette and Charlie Rich, whose recordings were commercial juggernauts on Billboard's country and pop charts. Jones was a different breed, a singer whose voice carried a frightening intensity, an unvarnished honesty that could turn a simple lyric into a shattering confession. But as the two began working together, the chemistry between Jones's vocal brilliance and Sherrill's orchestral vision became undeniable. Though Sherrill's biggest sales came from Wynette and Rich, his longest-lasting and perhaps most artistically rewarding collaboration was with George Jones. In Sherrill, Jones discovered a producer who understood the depth of his heartbreak songs and could summon for Jones the symphonies of sighing strings that almost made the misery sound better than happiness could possibly feel, as Andrew Mueller of Uncut later wrote. Sherrill built arrangements that wrapped around Jones's voice without drowning it, giving tracks an epic emotional scope. Rather than softening Jones's honky-tonk core, the lush country-politan sound heightened it, creating a tension that electrified listeners. Their breakthrough came in 1974 with The Grand Tour, a haunting ballad widely considered one of Jones's all-time masterpieces. The song's tale of a man walking listeners through the ruins of a failed marriage, paired with Sherrill's soaring production, reached #1 on the country charts and became an instant classic. Later that year, they struck again with The Door, another #1 smash. Its poignant lyric, "I've heard the sound of my dear old mother crying and the sound of the train that took me off to war," showcased how Sherrill's symphonic touches and Jones's heartbreaking delivery could create moments that felt cinematic, yet painfully intimate. Unlike many singers who might have been overwhelmed by such elaborate production, Jones's lucid tone and emotional power cut through even the heaviest string sections and background choirs. Sherrill himself marveled that Jones could hold his own against any arrangement. His voice was an instrument too commanding to be overshadowed. By this point, Jones had largely stepped back from writing much of his own material. Songwriters were eager to work with him, often competing to pitch their strongest compositions, knowing his interpretations could transform good songs into great ones. Still, Jones occasionally took up the pen, co-writing tracks that added to his legend. Among them were What My Woman Can't Do, also recorded by Jerry Lee Lewis, and A Drunk Can't Be a Man, a stark exploration of self-loathing and addiction. He also co-wrote the devastating I Just Don't Give a Damn, often described by critics as one of the greatest lost classics in his catalog, a raw, unfiltered outpouring of anger and despair. Another standout was These Days, I Barely Get By, which he wrote with Tammy Wynette, a song that bore the emotional fingerprints of their turbulent relationship. By the late 1970s, George Jones, long celebrated as one of country music's greatest voices, was slipping deeper into personal and professional ruin. Years of heavy drinking had already damaged his health and reputation, but the situation worsened when his manager, Shug Baggett, introduced him to cocaine. Baggett reportedly offered the drug before a show, hoping to jolt the exhausted singer into performing. The stimulant gave Jones enough energy to make it through the set, but it also intensified his already considerable paranoia, accelerating a downward spiral that would nearly destroy him. Jones's erratic behavior became frightening. In one notorious incident during a drunken binge, he shot at and nearly hit his friend and sometime songwriting partner, Earl "Peanut" Montgomery. Montgomery, having recently quit drinking and embraced religion, had distanced himself from Jones's self-destructive lifestyle. The confrontation was both shocking and symbolic. Jones's old drinking buddies were moving on, but he was clinging to chaos. Financially, Jones was in shambles. Despite his fame, he was often penniless, spending his earnings on alcohol, drugs, and reckless decisions. In his autobiography, Jones acknowledged that Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash repeatedly bailed him out during this time, quietly offering loans or covering expenses to keep him afloat. Promoters grew furious as he began missing shows at an alarming rate, leading to lawsuits and a reputation as unreliable. Fans sometimes arrived to find the No-Show Jones moniker was all too accurate. By 1978, Jones's personal and financial crises collided. He owed Tammy Wynette $36,000 in unpaid child support, claimed to be $1 million in debt, and ultimately filed for bankruptcy. His mental health deteriorated alongside his finances. Jones sometimes spoke in quarreling voices he later described as the Duck and the Old Man, as if two warring personalities were battling inside him. His friends and colleagues watched with alarm as he seemed to drift further from reality. In his article, The Devil in George Jones, writer Nick Tosches painted a grim picture. By February 1979, Jones was homeless, deranged, and destitute, living in his car and barely able to digest the junk food on which he subsisted. He weighed under 100 pounds. The once mighty singer, whose voice could break hearts, was now nearly unrecognizable. Frail, incoherent, and adrift. This period's turmoil even disrupted his recording career. It took more than 2 years to finish My Very Special Guests, an album conceived as a star-studded celebration of Jones's influence. Artists such as Willie Nelson, Linda Ronstadt, and Elvis Costello stepped in to lend their voices, not just out of admiration, but to prop up a man who could barely complete his own vocals. What should have been a straightforward project instead became a desperate effort to salvage Jones's career and life. Recognizing the severity of his condition, Jones finally entered Hillcrest Psychiatric Hospital in Birmingham, Alabama. Friends, family, and industry insiders hoped this stay would mark a turning point. But even after undergoing treatment, his struggles remained. Upon his release in January 1980, rather than embracing sobriety, Jones famously picked up a 6-pack of beer almost immediately, a bittersweet sign of how deep his addiction ran. On March 6, 1999, country legend George Jones nearly lost his life when he crashed his sport utility vehicle near his Tennessee home. The wreck was violent enough to send him to Vanderbilt University Medical Center, VUMC, where he remained under care for 2 weeks. Fans and fellow musicians held their breath as news of the accident spread. Jones's history with drinking made many fear the worst. When he was released from the hospital, the relief was tempered by the revelation that alcohol had indeed been involved. In May 1999, Jones pleaded guilty to drunk driving charges tied to the crash. The incident starkly contrasted the relatively optimistic tone he had taken in his 1996 memoir, where he admitted to occasionally having a glass of wine or beer but insisted, "I don't squirm in my seat, fighting the urge for another drink," and even speculated, "Perhaps I'm not a true alcoholic in the modern sense of the word. Perhaps I was always just an old-fashioned drunk." His words seemed ironic in the wake of the wreck. Yet, for Jones, the accident proved to be a turning point. In a 2006 Billboard interview, he recalled the moment vividly. "When I had that wreck, I made up my mind. It put the fear of God in me. No more smoking, no more drinking. I didn't have to have no help. I made up my mind to quit. I don't crave it." Unlike previous attempts to moderate his habits, this resolve stuck. Friends and fans noticed a visible change. The hard-living possum, who had long flirted with self-destruction, began to focus on his health, his faith, and his music. The years after the crash brought a period of creative reflection and renewed spirituality. In 2003, Jones released The Gospel Collection, a heartfelt return to his roots that featured traditional hymns and personal favorites. To produce the album, Billy Sherrill, his longtime collaborator and the architect of many of his greatest hits, came out of retirement, lending a sense of full-circle redemption to the project. The album was praised for its sincerity and depth, underscoring how Jones's voice, even after decades of wear, remained one of the most powerful instruments in country music. That same year, Jones performed at a televised Johnny Cash memorial concert in Jonesboro, Arkansas, joining Willie Nelson and Chris Christopherson on a rousing version of Cash's Big River. The performance symbolized his place among country music's giants and his enduring camaraderie with the genre's other legends. In 2008, Jones's career and cultural impact received one of its highest recognitions when he was awarded the Kennedy Center honor. sharing the stage with recipients Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey of The Who, Barbra Streisand, Morgan Freeman, and choreographer Twyla Tharp. President George W. Bush even remarked publicly that he kept many of Jones's songs on his iPod, a testament to the singer's influence beyond traditional country audiences. That same year, Jones also lent his expertise to the Independent Music Awards, serving as a judge for its 8th annual ceremony to support up-and-coming artists, a role that demonstrated his commitment to fostering new talent. As his touring slowed, Jones revisited the past with the 2005 album Hits I Missed and One I Didn't, in which he recorded songs he had once passed on, tracks that had become hits for other artists, alongside a remake of his most iconic number, He Stopped Loving Her Today. The project served as a bittersweet retrospective of a career filled with both triumphs and regrets, highlighting his unmatched ability to interpret a lyric. In 2012, just a year before his death, Jones was presented with the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, a crowning acknowledgement of his contribution to American music. The recognition reflected not just his unmistakable voice and catalog of classics, but also the remarkable resilience he had shown in overcoming his demons. By 2012, George Jones, at age 80, was still a towering figure in country music, but the physical toll of decades on the road and a lifetime of hard living had begun to show. On March 29, 2012, he was admitted to the hospital with an upper respiratory infection, an illness that would recur and serve as a prelude to the end of his life. Despite this setback, Jones maintained his characteristic professionalism and determination to perform, although his health remained precarious. Just a few months later, on May 21st, Jones was again hospitalized for complications related to the infection. He remained under medical care for 5 days before being released, a brief reprieve that allowed him to continue planning what would become a historic farewell to the stage. These health scares underscored the fragility of the man whose voice had defined country music for more than half a century, yet his spirit remained undiminished. On August 14, 2012, Jones announced the Grand Tour, a farewell tour intended to bring him to fans across the country. The tour was ambitious, with 60 cities scheduled, allowing devoted audiences from every corner of the United States to witness his final performances. Jones approached the announcement with a mix of solemnity and pride, knowing that each concert would be a capstone on an unparalleled career. His final performance on the road took place at the Knoxville Civic Coliseum in Knoxville, Tennessee, on April 6, 2013. Fans and fellow musicians knew this would be one of the last opportunities to see him live, making the concert an emotional culmination of decades of hits, duets, and unforgettable live moments. Jones had originally been scheduled to perform his final show at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville on November 22, 2013, but health issues would prevent him from reaching that milestone. On April 18, 2013, Jones was admitted to Vanderbilt University Medical Center, VUMC, with a slight fever and irregular blood pressure. His condition forced the postponement of several tour dates, including shows in Alabama and Salem. His stay in the hospital intensified as complications grew more severe, and after 6 days in intensive care, George Jones passed away on April 26, 2013, at the age of 81. The country music world, and indeed the music world at large, mourned the loss of a voice that had shaped an entire genre. Jones's funeral on May 2, 2013, was a star-studded and deeply moving affair, attended by friends, fellow musicians, and public figures. Former First Lady Laura Bush was among those who delivered eulogies, alongside Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, news personality Bob Schieffer, and country icons, Barbara Mandrell and Kenny Chesney. Musical tributes honored Jones's unmatched legacy, with performances by Alan Jackson, Kid Rock, Ronnie Millsap, Randy Travis, Vince Gill, Patty Loveless, Travis Tritt, the Oak Ridge Boys, Charlie Daniels, Wynonna, and Brad Paisley, ensuring that his voice continued to resonate even as he was mourned. The funeral was broadcast live across multiple platforms, including CMT, GAC, RFD-TV, the Nashville Network, FamilyNet, and local Nashville stations. Radio stations, including Sirius XM and WSM 650 AM, home of the Grand Ole Opry, also carried the service, allowing fans nationwide to participate in the tribute. In accordance with the family's wishes, contributions were encouraged to the Grand Ole Opry Trust Fund, or the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, supporting the institutions that had been central to Jones's life and career. George Jones was laid to rest at Woodlawn Cemetery in Nashville, leaving behind a profound legacy. His death made international headlines, with countless radio stations, especially country and classic hits formats, honoring him by playing his songs throughout the day. The outpouring of grief and reverence reflected the enduring impact of a man whose life had been marked by incredible talent, turbulent personal struggles, and an unshakable commitment to his craft. Through decades of hits, heartbreak, and redemption, George Jones had secured his place as the definitive voice of country music, a legend whose songs, spirit, and story continue to inspire generations. Now, let's talk about George Jones's very special house. Nestled in the lush Oak Hill neighborhood of Nashville, the estate at 4121 Franklin Pike, affectionately known as First Lady Acres, stands as a symbol of one of country music's most iconic couples, George Jones and Tammy Wynette. Purchased by Jones in the early 1970s for Wynette, the mid-century property was more than just a home. It became a physical manifestation of their professional and personal union, a backdrop to both their greatest triumphs and their most turbulent moments. The estate itself is an architectural statement of mid-century design, characterized by its expansive layout, clean lines, and elegant simplicity. Real estate coverage over the decades has highlighted the size and amenities of the home, noting that it offered both luxury and privacy, an essential combination for a couple constantly in the public eye. At a time when Jones and Wynette were ascending to the apex of country music fame, the property provided a sanctuary from the pressures of touring, recording, and constant media attention. First Lady Acres was not merely a residence, it was a stage for the couple's personal narrative. Music journalists and biographers frequently reference the estate when chronicling the Jones/Wynette era, describing it as a place where the intensity of their careers and the volatility of their marriage intersected. The house bore witness to quiet domestic moments, songwriting sessions, and impromptu rehearsals, as well as the emotional turbulence that accompanied a high-profile union. Within its walls, the contrast between Wynette's disciplined approach to her career and Jones's often chaotic personal life played out, giving rise to stories that would later become part of country music lore. The home's nickname, First Lady Acres, reflected Wynette's status as country music royalty and her own rising prominence in the industry. It became a hub not only for the couple, but also for visiting musicians, collaborators, and friends. Journalists and music historians note that the estate often served as a quiet retreat during the couple's intense touring schedules, offering a rare opportunity for privacy in an era before social media and constant paparazzi scrutiny. The property's spacious grounds and elegant interiors facilitated gatherings that combined both personal and professional elements, blurring the lines between home life and career in ways that mirrored the couple's public image. Over the years, the estate became inseparable from the Jones/Wynette narrative. Features in music magazines and real estate columns consistently cited 4121 Franklin Pike as emblematic of the golden age of their duets, from chart-topping hits like We're Gonna Hold On and Golden Ring, to the deeply personal songs that reflected the emotional highs and lows of their marriage. Fans and scholars alike came to view the home as a physical representation of their collaboration, a place where the personal lives of country's most famous couple intertwined with their art. Even after the couple divorced, the property retained its connection to Wynette, continuing to be referenced as part of her legacy. For collectors, biographers, and country music enthusiasts, First Lady Acres stands as more than real estate. It is a cultural landmark, a tangible reminder of the life and times of George Jones and Tammy Wynette. The estate reflects both the glamour and the struggles of their careers, encapsulating the romance, artistry, and heartbreak that defined their decades-long influence on country music. What do you think about George Jones? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.